we have boundaries, physical boundaries, according to like national borders or like geographical sort of boundaries, you know, like along with the natural boundaries. So all these boundaries have been formed historically. So, you know, they actually set the borders between different countries or different regions, you know, physically, according to like, you know, some nature like mountains and rivers. But the culture is a non-physical sort of phenomena. You know, if you were to think about like Korean culture, you know, or the what else, the Cambodian culture or like French culture, you know, it's invisible. You can't really see it with your own eyes, but we still know that it exists. But actually, the culture, actually, it goes beyond the physical borders or the boundaries, you know. So if you were to think about the Koreans living in Uzbekistan, you have some like ethnically Korean Uzbekistan there, right? So one of my students with ethnically Korean Uzbekistan. So although he has a Uzbek sort of nationality, you know, he's registered in Uzbekistan, but then culturally he's Korean. I mean, he might have been born in Uzbekistan, but you know, the food he eats and you know, some of the language expressions that he can employ, and you know, like a lot of like customs, you know, that he's familiar with is Korean. So we can say that, you know, like culture actually it's sort of mixes up, you know, like the physical boundaries as well as like invisible sort of thinking, beliefs, customs. So if you were to think about culture, is actually invisible phenomena, which includes values, like beliefs, or like customs, language. So it's originated from this Latin word colere, and it means to cultivate. A lot of English words, I think the French words as well, they are rooted in Latin and Greek etymology. So I mean, it'd be very nice if I have some time to explain, you know, what are those root words are, you know, and then you'll be able to actually see how those roots in Greek and Latin words, they form as to create this English or like the French words. But you know, let's just skip it now and just focus on the concept of culture. You know, it's not physical, it's not visible, but it still exists, and it includes those invisible values such as like beliefs, values, custom, language, and I guess the language is one of the most important things. All right, let's continue.
Culture and communication are inseparable. Communication spreads and maintains culture. Development of communication tools, print, telephone, internet, expanded interaction beyond local and cultural borders. Globalization has increased intercultural contact in business, politics, education, and travel, necessitating effective intercultural communication.
Right.
Intercultural communication origins and concepts. George Simmels' concept of stranger. Strangers are part of a system but not fully integrated, influencing intercultural communication studies. Robert E. Park developed the concept of social distance, measuring perceived intimacy with other groups.
Right.
Introduced the concept of marginal person, cultural hybrids living in two worlds but fully belonging to neither. The sojourner, individuals visiting another culture temporarily while returning their own, contributing unique perspectives.
Right.
Practical example of intercultural miscommunication. Cultural expectation shape communication style. Example, Korean value formality, addressing professor by first name can be unsettling compared to Western norms. Misunderstanding due to cultural differences can hinder effective interaction.
Right. So as I said, you know, one of the most important elements of culture is language, right? And it's because, you know, different cultures have different languages, you know, it basically produces some hindrances as to how we can communicate or how we make a nice conversation, you know. So it's very important that, you know, that concept of communication and culture are very much intertwined, you know, and then basically it's actually, you know, those concepts are quite, you know, useful to know, you know. Do you know the novel by Albert Camus? He has written this novel, like, you know, The Stranger. You know, So the concept of stranger is not like the person that you have for the first time. It's basically you feel estranged, you feel sort of foreign in living in this country. So if you are an international student coming to study here, and for the first few weeks you're going to be feeling very much of a stranger, right? You don't really know about the people here, you don't really know about the culture, you don't really know what to behave and stuff like that. So, you know, you feel very estranged by all the context and the people. And that's what it means by a stranger. And what else do we have? Okay, there's this concept, this term, which is called social distance. So it's not about physical distance. It's not like I'm like 1 meter or 2 meters away from Konyu, you know, it's not like that. But, you know, social distance or cultural distance means like invisible quality, you know, so you feel as not as intimate, you know, so maybe social distance between me and my husband were very narrow, whereas, some of my previous students, I feel much closer in terms of social distance than a lot of you guys I meet for the first time, right? So social distance means, you know, how intimate or how close you feel about the person. So it's a good term to know and to utilize. And what else do we have in here? Okay, this is very important. Marginal person or marginalized person. So it's a term which indicates a person which has been excluded from the majority, you know, or from the mainstream culture. So when you say, okay, he's a marginalized or he's a marginal person, it means that he doesn't really belong to the main culture. So I'm actually teaching all these terms so that you can actually use them in your writing or in your conversation. And then, I didn't really know about this term that much, but my husband used to use this term, the sojourner, which means, I think I used to be a sojourner when I was a college student or up till I graduated from my PhD, because I actually moved to like different countries. I think until I settled back in Korea, me and my husband moved more than 10 different times across 4 different countries. So we're sort of living in the States for 1 year. We lived in Germany for a year and a half, you know, so we sort of lived there and we knew the people and got the taste of the culture, but then we didn't stay there too long, you know, in order to fully embrace, you know, the mainstream culture. So you actually use this expression, the sojourner, to indicate a person who travels a lot, you know, who sort of has a dabbling of the culture side within the countries that they're traveling, but then it's not deep. So, you know, having the knowledge of these terms, you know, help you to understand, you know, better. And, you know, of course, we have a lot of like culture sort of taboos attached to like different groups, and I think the Koreans, you know, I think we actually prefer a lot of formality, whereas like Western people, they're not as much. So, you know, knowing this knowledge really helps. Okay, so emergence of intercultural communication. How did it emerge? Okay.
Emergent. How?
Take your time.
Emergence of intercultural communication.
Right.
First one is post-World War II emergence of intercultural communication.
Right.
After World War II, U.S. diplomats and aid workers faces challenges due to the cultural insensitivities. Programs like the Foreign Service Institution or FSI introduced cultural and language training. Edward T. Hall introduced the concept of the intercultural communications, like his book, The Silent Language, marks the field's formal establishment.
Right.
Broadening the scope of intercultural communication. Initially focused on national cultures, later expanded to include subcultures. Example, organizational cultures, genders, age, and lifestyle.
Right.
Key contributors: William B. Goody Kuntz and Yong Yun Kim applied the concept of strangers to intercultural communication and explores how individuals reduce uncertainty in intercultural contexts.
Right.
intercultural communication is relevant today. Increasing global interaction demands intercultural competence. Effective intercultural communication must be learned to navigate cultural diversity successfully. Scholars focus on reducing uncertainty and fostering understanding in intercultural exchange.
Right, so this is actually talking about how that field of communication, and it's actually the scholarly field of communication or the intercultural communication has evolved, and it's partly because, after the two world wars, what happened? We had like NATO established, right, in the Europe, and we had a lot of small nations established, right, and U.S. before the World War II, it used to be very isolationist, right? U.S. was basically saying that, okay, we're just going to protect the boundary of this nation, not more than that. And the Trump nowadays is actually trying to go back to pre-World War II era, to become more isolationist, and the U.S. Okay, we're not in charge of all the nations around the world. It's your stuff. You basically take care of all of your stuff. But then after the World War II, because of the war, we had all these like small nations being decolonized, and they became sovereign, independent nation, including the two Koreas, including us. And then we have NATO set up, UN, a lot of international organizations were created and have evolved as a result of this system, the whole new system. And because US began to get involved a lot with the diplomatic affairs, as a result of it, they started having this huge training in terms of their diplomacy with their diplomats, and also this field of culture, multicultural communication, or the field of communication has been developed as a result of the political change, right? So you have to understand this historical context. And we have Edward Hall. He's, I think, one of the most important scholars in intercultural communication. He has this very nice thesis. I like it. It really helps to understand the differences between the East and the West. He has developed this concept of low context versus high context. Edward Hall is, by the way, is a professor from the University of Toronto. He's Canadian. I like Canadians. They're very, very friendly. So low context culture is basically a lot of Western culture, like US, UK, I think France in part. So what it means is basically it's based on individualism. For that, individuals are a lot more important than the community or the state. So a lot more focuses on like natural law and a lot of individual sort of culture, individualistic culture. So here, the communication tends to be very direct. And also, like, you actually call, whatever professor, not as the titles, but you just call them by their names. So when I first went to UK, I just felt really strange that, I have to call my professor by their first names, because in Korea or a lot of Eastern countries, we put a lot of emphasis on like formality, like yay, a lot of being polite and stuff like that. But in low context culture, in Western culture, because of their philosophy, I think in the last semester when I was talking about global ethics, we talked a lot about the natural law, the development of this philosophical concept about the agency and individualism. I don't think we have all this time to talk about it, but basically this low context cultures or countries, they put a lot of emphasis on individualism and direct communication, very frank communication, open communications, whereas high context cultures are like Koreans or Cambodians. I don't know about Philippines, but this high context culture, a lot of them, is basically very community focused. So there are a lot of invisible norms and customs that people sort of navigate through, and a lot of emphasis on formality, and that's why communications tend to be quite indirect. You basically have to find out what the other person is saying, So he's developed this concept, and I think this is very good to know because it applies to our communication. So I've actually looked through many videos which illustrate the difference, and I found this project developed by some students at the Malaysian University. It was Singapore. I think it was either Singapore or Malaysia. All right, and they did this project on the low context and high context culture, the differences, and they were basically doing the scenarios or the role plays to illustrate the differences between the low context and high context cultures. So let's have a look.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, Evan. Well, time is precious. I was straight to the point. The Prince of Saudi Arabia has reached out to me for collaboration.
What collaboration? Oh, is it the one for you with China, the Arab company?
Yes, it's to build the world's tallest building in Saudi Arabia. Over there, you'll meet with their company agent for further progress.
Alright, we'll take care of it.
Three days later.
Assalamualaikum.
Oh, hi. I'm Hugh Figure from the job I'm seeking.
Nice to meet you. My name is Muhammad Osas and I will be your agent. You can call me Mr. Muhammad.
I'm Mr. Mohammed. So this is my assistant. I'm Lawrence.
What have you done?
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Oh, Mr. Mohammed, can we have the contact of the Arab's company? Yeah, we'd like to make a phone call, schedule our first meeting.
I see, but
Oh, okay. Dad, what's the time right now? Okay, the boss is coming.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alright, so this is Miss Hilfiger and that is Miss Lawrence from Anderson Inc.
Oh yeah, and so this is my business card.
This is my business card.
Thank you.
Please have a seat.
Thank you.
start our business?
Finally. Okay, sure.
Please go ahead.
Marhaba. كيف حالها؟ Alright, let's continue.
One eternity later.
We'd like to make an appointment for our next meeting. Is Friday at 4 p.m. suitable for you?
I'm afraid not. How about Monday 2 p.m.?
Alright, it sounds good.
Alright, so this video reminds me a lot of the communication that I've had when I was working at KAIST. So I was working at this department called G School. It's an abbreviation for Global School. And they were basically establishing sort of global campuses in the Middle East. So I did a lot of communication with the people working at Zayed University and American University of Sharjah. They're both in UAE. And this is, oh, okay, I got rid of it. But the cultural differences there was just so obvious. So they're living in a very high context society. I think they're much more high context than we do, the Koreans do. So for them, hierarchy is very important. So they're trying to be punctual, but then a lot of times they actually come to the meetings late because they have calls from this prince or like princesses. So if they just feel that there's a higher up person calling them, regardless of whether they have a meeting with foreigners or not, it doesn't really matter as much. So that formality and hierarchy is very important. And as you can see, like for South Arabians, like putting the languages together in any kinds of formal sort of contract or formal documents is really important. So we just spend so much time sort of making sure that the English translation and Arabic translations of the documents, they match together. So there's a lot of formality, and this concept is also very useful. So South Arabian culture, or to some extent, the Korean culture is like polychronic. So chronos means time, and poly means many. Okay, so we actually apply many different times for like different circumstances and different people. Whereas Western culture, American culture is monochronic. It's like mono is just one, right? Monologue, And chronic, chronos means like time. So they try to be very punctual. And for them, making an appointment is very important. So regardless of whether the higher ups, their boss actually call them or not, just making sure that you're being very punctual with the appointment is really, really important. And I was very glad that you guys came on time because I'm more like a monochronic person, okay? All right, so let's go back to the PPT. Okay, so we covered this. Okay. Now let's do some exercise. So I have these 5 different questions, all right? So first question wants to work for a foreign country. Second, speaks at least 2 different languages. He has visited at least 3 countries. Has lived in a foreign country. Has a foreign friend. These questions. You basically, sorry, you go around. I'll actually distribute you with class notes. You go around and find out the person who matches the characteristic in the numbers. And any one of you who actually gets the names for all the 10 questions for the first time, the fastest, I'm going to give you some prize. I'm gonna give you a present next class. All right, so I'm just gonna distribute the class note. You go around, ask a question, and write down the names. Okay? Anyone who matches the category. So say we have Claire who can speak two different languages, and you just write down the name. Yeah, just go around and ask. Yeah. Make sure that you get the class note first, okay? This is ice-breaking practice. You guys are like, ooh, nervous, you know. This ice-breaking practice. So you just go around, ask the question, and write down the name that matches the characteristic. You can move around. You're free to move around. The first person who gets the 10 questions, I mean the 10 names. No, so you find out the name, the student who actually wants to work for a foreign country. Yeah. By asking questions. Yeah, different person for different characteristics. That's the caveat. You know, you get to know about the other person. All right. It's ice-breaking practice. That's why you have to go around to ask questions.
Sorry.
To find out the person who speaks in China, Jeju Island. Yeah, you have to find a Korean person. I have a prize. I have a prize. Not today, but
So you
next
want
class.
for a foreign company? Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
Just call me Ping. My real name is Ping. Just put me in number 8.
8?
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, what's the name? Okay.
What about you? Okay, so you have foreign friends.
Yeah. Have you visited Jeju?
Yeah, a lot of
Okay.
times.
Okay.
Yeah, who has visited 300? At least 300. Time's clicking.
Hello. Have you visited at least 3 countries? Can I?
Oh, my name is Ping.
Can I ask you what are the 3 countries? The name of the countries?
Which
Yeah, 3 countries.
Malaysia, China, Thailand.
Thailand.
So, have you visited Japan?
A lot of times.
Actually, I've changed my mind. I'm gonna pick two fastest. I'm gonna prepare 2 presents.
Not a bit.
Only speak in English, no Korean. Only speak in English.
Speak to language. Yes. No, I think it was your name. Which number?
Finish? Alright, we have the first winner. One more. Okay. Great. Honda is the first one. We have one more person waiting. The second. Alright, clear. Time's up. Okay, let's get back to the seats. Well done. Oh, this is actually faster than I imagined. Alright, well done.
Speed, girl.
That's very good. That's very good. You guys were like brilliant. Did it? Okay, let's get back to the PPT.
Globalization and communications. Early ancestors lived in a small village and rarely ventured far from their communities. Communication among them relied heavily on face-to-face interactions within their close-knit communities. Advances in transportation, telecommunication, international business, and political exchange have connected strangers from different parts of the world. Modern society forms communities and encounters diverse cultures in various settings, including business, education, public places, neighborhoods, and cyber space. Globalization is central to modern culture, and cultural practices are at the heart of globalization.
Right, so we live in the era of globalization. This is so obvious, right? And the reason that you actually have to practice intercultural communication face to face is because this is the first step that you can actually communicate with foreign nationals, not on face-to-face basis, but online. Like for me, like I worked at a startup and I worked at a school, and I just had so many Zoom calls. I think I had more than like 100. And I set up an office in Oxford, UK, without being there. And I was able to do that. My co-workers and I were able to do that because we lived in UK and we knew how to communicate with them. We had the culture sense and culture knowledge. That's why we didn't actually have to go there because it was during the COVID time. So there was a limitation to travel internationally, but still we were able to set up an office in Oxford because by learning how to communicate effectively face to face, we can actually have a lot of Zoom calls. We don't have to meet face to face, but we can still communicate as to make something happen together. All right, so the global village, that concept is pretty important. So yeah, next. Is it working? Yeah.
Global village, Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan, born in Canada in 1911, introduced the concept of global village in his 1964 essay, Understanding Media, the Extensions of Man. The global village idea emerged from McLuhan's observation of how media transcended physical distances, bringing people closer and turning the world into a global community.
Right.
McLuhan's vision anticipated behaviors typical and villagers in the global village, predating the internet and social networks.
Right.
Media communication. Technological advancement and globalization have made the world more interconnected, leading to international contact and a shared global experience. McLuhan foresaw a hyper-connected world, envisioning constant global connectivity through smart communication devices.
Who has heard of this term, this expression, global village? Nobody? Global village? No? Well, maybe we're living a different generation, huh? Huh? Yeah, global village. Yeah. We live in a global village, you know. And it's actually coined by this Canadian professor during the 1960s. So it was before the internet emerged, and he had this term to describe this phenomena that people living in different parts of the world will actually become similar in a sense that we live in a similar village, But what do you mean by that? So he had this interview. It's actually quite funny because it was filmed very long time ago, so it's actually black and white. But listening to his interview is very good because it tells a lot about the phenomena as of now as well.
The best distinction now might be found in the phrase "with it." You know how we speak of being with it, meaning we've understood completely. We've got the message, as it were, in every way possible. But in the older book or print culture, people were not with it, and they were away from it by themselves with their own private point of view. Now, you have no point of view when you're with it because you accept the thing totally. And we're with it because these new media of ours, the one you talked about in the appliance store, have made our world into a single unit. The world is now like a continually sounding tribal drum, where everybody gets the message all the time. A princess gets married in England, and boom, boom, boom go the drums. We all hear about it. An earthquake in North Africa, a Hollywood star gets drunk, away go the drums again. I use the word tribal. It's probably the key word of this whole half hour. Why, Marshall, do you use the word tribal? Why? Well, I think you'll find everything we observe tonight about the media points in the direction of tribal man and away from individual man.
By individual man, I assume that you're referring to John's literary one.
Yes, and tribal man is the man created by the new electronic media.
So that this would be the basic change we spoke of at the beginning.
Yes, we're re-tribalizing. Involuntarily, we're getting rid of individualism. We're in the process of making it tribe. For just as books and their private point of view are being replaced by the new media, so the concepts which underlie our actions, our social life, are changing. We are no longer so concerned with self-definition, with finding our own individual way. We're more concerned with what the group knows, of feeling as it does, of acting with it, not apart from it.
Look, let's back up just a bit, Marshall.
Okay, so it's a bit difficult, so I'll just explain. So he's the interviewer. So the person who's been speaking is a Professor McLuhan. It was filmed a long time ago, that's why it's black and white. So he's saying that, okay, what do you mean by global village? And it means that people are actually becoming more like a tribal man. What do you mean by tribal man? And tribal man, basically, he or she is different from the literary man. And it's closely intertwined with the emergence of the media, the common media. So he actually turned this word or this expression when the TV became really popular. So what kind of message do you hear from the TV? Like Hollywood, stars and major wars around the world, and if there's pop songs, all this like common sort of culture thing. So this culture message that's been transported through the common media, which is TV, because before the emergence of the media, which is TV at the time, but nowadays there's a lot more various kinds, right? Internet, like social media, like the phones and everything. But with the emergence of the common media, basically people get sort of similar message. Because before, people were reading the books, that's what it means by literary man. And people are more, this is based on the Western context, not on Eastern sort of Asian context. So in the Western culture, people used to read books a lot, right? And they had different kinds of books that they liked to read, you know? So people had different thoughts and people have different perspectives and different viewpoints on the world. But because with the emergence of the media, and the same messages are spreading around the world, more or less, you know? So we hear a lot of Hollywood, we hear about the US perspectives. If you watch CNN, like, you know, all this like very popular, powerful media, their messages are similar. So basically, Professor McLuhan coined this term global village to criticize the influences of the media. And I think this is very true. So what kind of media or what kind of media channels that you actually listen to determines a lot of your viewpoints, you know? And that's why I think in the last class, in the last semester, when we were doing the negotiation and presentations, I asked a lot of international students to bring in their sources of media. So for Bangladesh students, they actually translated the Bangla news in Bangla language, because what Bangladesh people view about this certain war, maybe like Russian-Ukraine war, is very different, you know, from like other people, like say the Korean people or the American people. So that's why it's very important that we actually think about what kind of media that we listen to. And do we actually have the similar message that's coming out of the media that we listen to? Or what kind of message that we can actually have if we were to change the media, right? And this is very important. And that's why it's actually really good that we have different nationalities. And, you know, like we have a student from Thailand, from Cambodia, you know, they have their own languages and their own media, which are very different from the Korean media. So when we have French students, you know, French has a very different voice, I know that, you know, so, you know, we can actually talk about the same topic, but from very different perspectives, because we have different media to talk about and different languages to talk about. And that's basically the essence of the intercultural communication, okay? Okay, the next page, oh, okay, we have to go back to the PPT. Okay, I covered this. Okay, next. Who's turn? Or?
Information and Communication Technologies, ICTS, and it enable global economics and technological changes, transforming local business transactions into global interaction.
Right.
Global transformation involves worldwide economic shifts, influencing how people relate to each other and create cross-cultural business transactions.
Right.
Cultural diversity driven by globalizations presents economics, opportunities, and challenges in society, requiring acceptance and understanding.
Right.
Business responds to economics transformations by expanding into world markets, shaping market demand and economics behaviors. Multinational corporations relocate operations overseas to leverage lower labor costs, leading to ethnic diversity in workplaces worldwide.
Yeah, and partly the reason that the intercultural communication becomes so much important these days is because we have so many multinational corporations. Even in Korea, I mean, we have a lot of Korean multinational corporations which have offices around the world, right? So if you were to work in those countries, I mean, those companies or corporations, you know, you basically have to know, how to communicate with the people from different countries. And that's why you are here. Okay, next. I think you just turned it, oh yeah.
Increasing migration and international exchange significantly contribute to multicultural environments.
Right.
In 2012, 232 million people, 3.2% of the world's population, were international migrants, up from 175 million in 2000 and 154 million in 1990s. The USA hosted the largest number of international migrants, 45.8 million in 2003, with other top countries including Russia, Germany, and Saudi Arabia. Migration enhanced cultural diversity in receiving countries and contributes to social and economic development in both the origin and destination countries. The challenges is to maximize the benefits of international migration while minimizing negative implication.
Right.
Many migrants establish small businesses contributing to the cultural diversity of cities.
Right. The statistics has been outdated because I actually transplanted it from the textbooks. The textbooks tend to be very outdated. So yeah, we can actually Google it or the use the ChatGPT to get the recent statistics. I think I read an article that Korea actually is the second country in terms of the percentage increase of the migrants coming in. So we're not the country we actually accept the most number or second most number of migrants, but actually in terms of the percentage increase, we are the second. So next to Britain. So Britain, UK, it's basically, I mean, it has a lot of migrants coming in. They have a lot of people migrating from the Southeast Asia. But Korea, we have a lot of international students coming in, like you guys, to study, and we have a lot of foreign workers. And the percentage increase is quite significant these days, so it's very important to know. And I know that Saudi Arabia, UAE are very attractive destination for a lot of Europeans to migrate these days, because the European economies are not doing very well. So a lot of they actually criticize or they complain that a lot of the brains within the UK or the other European countries, they actually move to the Dubai or other cities in the Saudi Arabia or the UAE, because they actually offer really good benefits and also like very nice places to live. Their tax exemption rate is very good. So there's a lot of migration going on, but with the Trump administration coming in, I think there's a shift or there's going to be a halt. But then the big mainstream sort of trend is still a lot of people like migrate and like they come in and they go out. So this is a significant trend. And actually the UN produces or publishes more than 300 pages long reports on international migration every year. So you can actually go and have a look. They have big statistics. All right, multiculturalism. Who's next?
Global diversity and multiculturalism. Nations worldwide are grappling with growing cultural diversity. Concept of multiculturalism. Descriptive level characterize societies with diverse cultures. Attitudinal level refers to societal tolerance and acceptance of equal participants in diverse culture. Challenges: balancing cultural diversity's benefits while addressing concerns about threats to cultural uniqueness.
Right.
Second, concerns and response to diversity. Post-national concerns, potential threat to mainstream cultural values, political and economic power structures, and employment opportunities.
Right.
Governmental measures, restrictive policies, tighter immigration and citizenship requirements,
right.
And cultural preservation, policies allowing immigrants to maintain home cultures within host societies.
Right. I'll actually explain the differences between these three concepts, which are very important for you to actually not just memorize but understand. I think you've heard a lot about these three terms, which are nationalism versus multiculturalism versus cosmopolitanism. Right, so basically nationalism emphasizes which nationality do you belong to. So for Onda, you're Uzbekistan, right? So nationalism basically says, okay, so where you belong to is the most important, right? So your nationality, if I'm a Korean, a lot of emphasis on like who belong to this nation, and we have to promote the interests of who belong to this nation. That's basically the simple version of nationalism. Whereas multiculturalism, it emphasizes the cultural side of a person or a group of people or even the nation. Okay? So within the country, even in Korea, we have a lot of different cultures existing, right? Maybe Korea is quite monocultural. We're not that multicultural, but France has a lot of multicultural sort of segments in the society. You have a lot of immigrants, right? So a lot of European countries, they actually have different ethnic culture groups. So they actually give permission for these different ethnic groups to pursue and promote their own cultures within the society they live, right? So if you were to go to London, there's this district, I forgot the specific name of it, but in that district, most of them are Muslim. And they have their own Sharia law, so even, they live in Britain, so they have to follow the rules and regulation of Britain, but within the district, women, they wear the veils, and they actually go to Muslim schools to learn about Quran, so they most of the time they try to follow their own culture. So that's what it means by multiculturalism. Although you live in the country and your nationality might be British or French, but still you put more emphasis on the difference of the culture that you have, right? But what about cosmopolitanism? Who has heard about this term? Cosmopolitanism. Nobody? Cosmopolitan. Hassan, you've heard about it, right? You forgot? We just took the exam last semester, right? Cosmopolitanism is basically cosmos. What do you mean by cosmos? Universe, right? Universe. So they emphasize universal values, such as human rights. Human rights and maybe to some extent capitalism. A lot of people just accept capitalism for granted, right? So if you were to have a universal sort of values to be shared, for a lot of foreign international people like coming into Korea, you actually accept certain values that we have, and these are universal. Most of the people think the human rights is one of the most important values that you have to adhere to, right? So these values and capitalism, you earn according to your ability, meritocracy, all those values, common values. And cosmopolitanism basically emphasizes the common values or the norms to be shared among different types of people. So you actually hear a lot of these terms mixed up, but remembering the differences among these terms is very helpful. All right, next. Who's next? Okay.
Understanding status and towards acceptance.
Right.
Cultural diversity enriches individuals and societies by bringing forth a variety of traditions and customs. Awareness of local laws and customs in a new country can lead to legal consequences.
Right.
Local law vary globally, and ignorance may lead to legal consequences. Cultural socialization may lead to
ethnocentrism.
It's nothing. See one's culture as superior and others as inferior. Ethnocentrism can result in prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination, acting as a barrier to effective intercultural communication.
Right, so there are these two terms that you have to remember. The cultural socialization is basically, what do you mean by socialization? You adjust to the societal norms of the country that you settle in, right? So what do you mean by cultural socialization is basically you accept the culture of the group or the nation or the community that you belong to, or that you want to belong to. So that's what it means by cultural socialization, and that has a hazard in becoming ethnocentrism. What do you mean by ethnocentrism? It's actually opposite concept to multiculturalism. So ethno means, what do you mean by ethnic group? people.